And welcome to Off the Couch, where psychology meets everyday life. I'm Dr. Greg Cason, psychologist, here with Brian Gomez, producer. Hey, Brian.
Happy Monday.
And also, specially here is Tony Sweet, and he on the board. And Tony is also going to join the conversation today. Hi, Tony.
Hello.
Today we have a special episode. All three of us went to see Wicked, didn't we? Of course, with the rest of the nation. And we're going to talk about the psychology of Wicked, the good, the bad, and the green. Also, we're going to talk about 11 psychological themes in the movie. And then at the end, we're going to assess who really is the good one, who's really the bad one, and who's just green. Sound good?
That sounds great.
And a caution, I mean, this is so dumb, but yeah, we may spoil. If you haven't seen the movie, some of these things may be spoilers, but so be it. I don't think you're listening if you haven't seen it, but if you do see it, at least you'll be better prepared for a lot of the things, because the movie's actually quite good and quite complex. What did you guys think about the movie in general?
Oh, I loved it. You know how it said it's almost 3 hours?
Yeah.
It felt like an hour. I wanted more, honestly. I know some people were like, oh, it was so long. And I'm like, honestly, I was just entertained. So I loved every moment of it.
Yeah, that was my impression. It flew. It actually really entertains you, grabs you from the very first moment, and you just ride with the movie like a little trip down, I don't know, fantasy lane. Did you like it, Tony?
I loved it too, yes, and agree. I've watched 3-hour movies before where you're like, oh my gosh, is this ever going to end? And this one did go really fast.
Which is surprising, and I think a lot of people were surprised because it's a musical. I've heard a lot of people saying, I don't like musicals, but this one I thought was okay. I do like musicals, and I was really worried going into this movie because I was like, oh, we've got these pop star girls, doing the roles. I was wrong. They were incredible. You got Jeff Goldblum as the Jeff Goldblum. What's his name? Anyway, he is the wizard, and you've got all these major stars in the show, but that ended up being kind of an interesting feature that they portrayed. And I loved all the cameos from the original Broadway Wicked cast that were in the movie, which I don't think everyone caught, which was pretty much a trip when that happened.
How could you have missed it, though?
I don't think a lot of people knew who Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth were, although they pretty much approximated their roles as Elphaba and Glinda in that reprise in Oz. So that was kind of interesting. The original Nessa Rose was actually Glinda's mother. Who else was in this show? Oh, yeah. Stephen Schwartz, who wrote the music for the show, was one of the Oz characters in the Land of Oz. There were a bunch of them that just kind of popped out there.
That's pretty cool. I didn't even know all that, so thank you.
Yeah, it was cool that they had all those things. And who was one of the Munchkins? I think the woman who wrote the book or something. Anyway, let's talk about the different psychological themes. The first one that I saw in this was almost from the very beginning. You remember when they find out that the witch is dead. The movie starts finding out that the wicked old witch, the witch of the West, Elphaba, is dead. And when somebody asks Glinda, did you know her? You knew her from the past? So, you were friends? And then she's like, oh yeah, I was acquainted with her. And then she kind of starts to go down memory lane in her mind in talking to Elphaba. And what that started to bring up with me was the first major psychological theme that came up in this movie, which was trauma and grief. That there were they had strained family relationships. You saw that in Elphaba's feelings of inadequacy and abandonment. And you saw that, didn't you see that from the first moments when you're looking at this family and you're looking at the parents. The father is the mayor of Munchkinland, and they're going through, and the father goes out on a trip, and the mother has an affair with someone, and she drinks a green bottle of liquid. And then, the next scene you see, she's giving birth to little Elphaba, who is green. And the father is instantly horrified and wants the child taken away. Instantly horrified. So you see this that happens, and what's implied is that the mom had an affair here, and that the Elphaba is actually the bastard child. So it seemed to me that maybe the father actually knew. But
And
what did you guys think?
It also happens often too, like in other movies or TV series where, let's say the child is born with a disability, or like they can't speak properly or anything, and like the father will be really embarrassed that their child is like not perfect or normal or anything, and wants them not to be part of the picture or anything like that.
For me, what was weird though, the youngest daughter did have a disability also, and he
Nessa Rose.
That was like his princess, which is
it was his princess. And Elphaba had a deep caring and love for her little Nessa Rose, and even in the very beginning was protecting her sister from the bullies, or maybe the bullies were aimed at her, but she definitely wanted to protect her sister, and that was very evident. And later we find out that maybe the father blamed Elphaba for Nessa Rose's condition. That's what Elphaba does confess to Glinda in that scene where they're actually telling each other secrets.
right.
And she comes out with a whopper saying that the father may blame her for Nessa Rose being in the wheelchair because she made her eat, and I didn't write it down, milk flour or something, to try to keep her from being green.
I think it was milk thistle or something like that.
Milk thistle, keep her liver going. But I found that kind of interesting. So definitely what we see, I mean, maybe beside the bullying, but the actual abandonment, the father just mistreating and not caring for his own daughter, leaving for his own daughter, it's his daughter, maybe not biologically, but leaving her to be raised more by the nanny, who was a bear who could speak, and I think that comes back later in the movie, but really doting over little Nessa Rose, who is very sweet in the movie, very wonderful. But we'll see about what happens next. What did you think, Brian? Did you see trauma and grief in this movie?
Oh, yeah, throughout the whole film, it's a beautiful way how they portrayed everything, and how they really showed you how people start off, like their childhood, it's this trauma, and everything starts from when they're kids, and they have to carry that throughout their entire life.
They really do. And I think the second one really blends into the trauma and grief, which is bullying and social exclusion. We see that right from the very beginning because little Elphaba is green. She's born green, so she's in a certain way a freak of society. Like everyone finds her odd for having green skin. And she experiences the bullying and ostracism because of her appearance, but also because of her strong opinions, which makes her fiercely independent. Like people reject her, so she kind of has to bone up and be strong and be able to put her shoulders back and be able to approach others. And she's also deeply caring. That's the interesting thing. And we see that play out with Nessa Rose. We see it play out with the animals, all the animals who could talk, who accept her I don't think there was a single animal who rejected her, but a lot of the humans did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The skin color for me brought up like the whole scenario about racism. That's what really pointed out, and I feel like I hope people can understand that effect of how people, just because they have a different skin tone from you, people will often be like, oh, that's weird, or that's wrong, or that's bad. And like, it shows the movie really portrayed that it's just because of her skin color that people treated her so differently and awful in that way.
And I think the choice to have an actress here who's black versus a lot of the Broadway actresses, which are various ethnicities. But, you know, I think Idina Menzel, I think she's Caucasian. I don't know. But she's the one who played the original Elphaba. But definitely racism is a big part of this particular story, and it is portrayed in the color of the skin. But the fact that she's black and they show the mother and the sister, that it's a non-issue, but when you see green, then it's very much an issue. So it does portray racism in a more stark manner, I think, because of all those background factors. That's just me. But to go with the racism too, I have the psychological impact of being othered and how it shapes your mental health. So if you're somehow this other person, you know, you're not fitting into the social norm of whatever group, you get othered, and it does negatively impact your mental health because of social exclusion. We don't just see this in racism, we see it in sexism with boys clubs, we see it in gender ism, you know, or people looking at someone who doesn't fit into a gender specific norm. We also see it in people who might have differences in dress or physical attractiveness or being a geek, just not fitting into the social norm and being excluded.
Yeah, and the movie did a really good job at like showing how hurtful bullying and being an outsider can be. Like, they showed it so well, especially in that dance scene that they have when she first wears her hat. Elphaba wears the black hat, the witch hat that Glinda gave her.
There are two scenes that made me love this actress playing Elphaba that made me think, wow, she's incredible. And that dance scene was so incredible. And this is something you didn't see in the stage play, because what they allowed for here is something we get uniquely from film, was up close takes of the person's expression, and you get right into their soul. It's sort of like you feel the pain that was inside of her as she's out there dancing, and everyone's just, they all spread into a circle around her and just laugh at her.
You saw the vulnerability of somebody so different, and you felt her sadness and brokenness in that moment, I feel like, right?
I really felt it. Yeah, I really felt it. And I think that particular scene, you just loved everything about her, because not only was she vulnerable and shocked. I think she went in with the impression, wearing that hat, thinking she would be accepted, thinking that she was okay to come to this event because they kind of misled her earlier. And goes into the event and goes out there, and everyone just laughs because of her hat, because of her. And she does this dance that wasn't like the other dances. And you saw the vulnerability, but you also saw her strength. And I was so taken with the scene and the actress, and also what happens next with Ariana Grande going out and dancing with her, which I thought was an incredible, incredible moment between two people.
She was so good in that scene too, because you feel her feeling horrible for, first of all, giving her the hat, and then making her building up her confidence and then it being destroyed on the dance floor in front of everybody. And you can tell that she feels terrible about her being in that position right there, which is kind of like something you wouldn't expect from the popular girl in those, like in a movie like this or anything, for her to actually feel and have like a change of heart, you know?
Brian, did you get Mean Girl vibes at all from Glinda?
It wasn't like purposely mean girl vibes. It's like she's so in her own world that what comes out of her mouth doesn't seem wrong or inconsiderate to her. It seems like she's just doing the best that she knows how to do in like her own little world. But from an outsider point of view, little comments or little things that she would have been doing were kind of mean girl, popular girl kind of things, you know?
That's true. I guess she wasn't a true Regina George because Regina George and Mean Girls really did kind of understand the impact of her behavior. Here, she just sort of it's just sort of in her own way dancing through life, which is actually a song that Fierro sings. And I thought that was a powerful song because he's kind of singing in that song, I'm dancing through life, just kind of skidding by. He goes from school to school, gets kicked out. He just, he's kind of a ne'er-do-well. And you get later that's because he's can't really meet anyone who's his equal. He's just sort of just kind of having fun. And you finally does meet his equal in a very interesting way with Elphaba. You get that feeling as well, that he actually meets someone who really intrigues him and that he really wants to be with, versus the person who's his obvious match, which is Glinda, which is, just another sort of vapid surface person. But you get with him that he's much deeper. With her, you have to watch the transformation that she goes through in the movie.
No, yeah, I loved it. I mean, they did so well with all of the characters. I did like how he fell for Elphaba for just her being so strong and different and didn't really care to fit in and like go with like the popular kids or try to like kiss up to them to just fit in, you know? He saw that she was different and like actually liked that about her.
And this is the green skin thing. That goes to the third theme, which is identity and self-acceptance. The green skin thing on my part, it's the issues that we cannot change about ourselves. Like the gay kid who is very, very effeminate, it's the, overweight kid. It's the kid who is born with some kind of deformity or something that, that they find that the other kids find negative and want to push against. Or even the kid that just doesn't have parents who have a great deal of money, so they wear hand-me-downs. These are things they can't really control. And the green skin in many ways represents that thing that we cannot fix, we can't control, and it ends up alienating you from other people. Which I thought was, yeah.
Yeah, she was trying, like, her whole dream was for her not to have green skin. That's why she wanted to go meet the Wizard of Oz. And at the end, like, you saw that she finally was like, no, I love, like, my green skin. Like, that wasn't her, dream anymore to change her skin.
And in fact, that really brings to the metaphor that what you're pointing out, Brian, is embracing one's own uniqueness, despite what other people think, despite societal judgment. Being able to embrace it.
Whether it's like dating or making friends, young or older, I mean, I feel like it follows us throughout our entire lives where we have our own little things that we look at ourselves in the mirrors and we're like, I wish I could change this. I wish I could change this. But some people wish they had those things that we are trying to get rid of, So it's kind of like a beautiful thing to really appreciate yourself for what you are.
And it's no doubt to me that this movie is so popular with gay men because so many gay men specifically deal with self-doubt, internalized shame, and that watching someone like Glinda, who's so ostracized, I mean, not Glinda, I'm sorry, Elphaba, go through this transformation and to become her own woman, to be able to be accepted a little bit, but then realize the cost of acceptance is too big. She could have stayed accepted, if you will, if she had just gone along with the program in Oz. But she had to eventually kind of come into her own self-empowerment and be okay with who she is, because who she is was true to her values and true to her core self.
That's what I love, that she was a good person. Like, you saw she was a good person. The fact that she was trying to help the animals whenever they were getting silenced and taken away and weren't allowed to teach anymore, to where she stole the little tiger and like let him out in the forest. Just, you saw her truly being a good person the entire time.
So, fun fact about me, when I was a kid, I read several of the Oz books. And since this, before we did this podcast, I went back and reread The Wizard of Oz. First thing I thought was, how did I think this was so amazing? Because I did when I was a kid. But when you're young, it's a children's book. It's written for kids. It's written in a very simple manner. Because I kept thinking, I want more detail. But one thing that's true about the story is they go into a lot more than the original Wizard of Oz movie does. And the book Wicked is it's not written by L. Frank Baum. And L. Frank Baum is the author, and I believe he first published The Wizard of Oz. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz is the first book, and I believe he published that in 1900. I believe the movie came, Tony, you can probably let me know, was it 1938 or 39?
39.
39, yeah. I mean, an amazing achievement, I think. And they did a good job in the movie of sort of truncating the book, which, and they kind of pushed things together to make it a little more fast and entertaining. And then there were other versions. There are several books, but one thing I really liked about the stage play that was true in the book is the Emerald City wasn't green. The Emerald City was mostly white. I mean, just like it was just not, it was, or I mean, maybe it just, the reason it appeared emerald is because everyone was forced to wear glasses so they would see it as green. And you don't find out that in the first book, but you get a little bit of a hint of it when Dorothy leaves the Emerald City and she finds that her green dress is turned white. And I think there's another article of clothing on maybe Toto or one of the others that turns white. And that's how she frames it. Oh, they took out the glasses. She steps outside and the clothes turned white. But they were forced to wear glasses. And one thing I loved about the stage play, because it wasn't in the original movie, is that they wore the green glasses. In the stage play, I was disappointed in the movie they didn't wear the green glasses. Because to me, this was part of the allegory. So L. Frank Baum was really trying to tell the story of what was going on here. And it was a political allegory, even though it's a children's book. And one thing he was envisioning is basically people who have to go into these like societies, political regimes, they're forced to put on glasses to be able to see a reality that isn't true.
Wow.
Which I thought was fascinating. When I was a kid, I thought this was the coolest thing, that was going on. By the way, Elphaba, think about it. L. Frank Baum. Elphaba. L. Frank Baum. Yeah. It's a good callback to him. I think, or a good, honoring of him. Also, to go back into Glinda's transformation too, she goes through a transformation in the movie. You think this chick has it all together. You think she has everything, and she sort of appears to. And the girls next to me just never stop talking. I got to see this movie again without being in a theater with like people who were talking the whole time. But they were going off about how she's Barbie, 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 because I guess there was a lot of pink going on and long blonde hair. So there are a lot of Barbie callbacks in this section next to me. But but she does first appear like a Barbie-like figure, but she really starts to have to deal with her societal expectations of this perfection, of this, popular girl who's always on top, who always gets everything what she wants, and has to suddenly start to discover a depth within her that I don't know that she knew that she had until she met Elphaba.
And she got one of her first rejections from Fiera.
Oh yes, she's like, oh,
like what
was I rejected? Or yeah, like that's weird. And Fiyero got his first rejection from Elphaba.
Yeah,
so he was quite shocked at that too. They're both two people who got everything they wanted. So. By the way, do you know who Fiyero was? He's this guy, Bailey, I think is his last name. Did you recognize him, Brian? You watched Bridgerton.
Bridgerton. So he's been on a lot lately, actually. He's been doing a lot of different things, but I was so happy he was on there because I love him as a character from Bridgerton. So I was like, yes, he's going to be great in this one too. So yeah, the character was perfect too.
I'll tell you, I recognized him, but I didn't know where from, and it really bugged me. So I finally looked it up. I'm like, where do I know this guy from? I knew him from Fellow Travelers.
Oh, yeah.
He plays one of the two lovers in Fellow Travelers. He's actually the main character in that particular show that really looks at the McCarthy hearings, and he's a gay man that works for the government. And you're looking at the McCarthy hearings. And I thought, he's incredible. He's an incredible actor. He could dance. I mean, he's incredible. So hats off to Fiyero.
And with Ariana Grande, I think she's super talented, respect her as an artist, but like as a person, it wasn't somebody that I'm like, oh, I love her. You know how like a lot of people do like live for her. But this movie made me like her so much, from just how campy she was and funny. Like, you fell in love with her even more if you weren't already a fan,
Me too, Brian. Me too. I was like, oh, a pop star playing this role. No, hands down, she was fantastic. What did you think, Tony?
I agree. I like Will, my husband. He's always, oh, Ariana, and I'm like, she's good. I like her. I wasn't. Yeah, overly, but
there's nothing negative.
I was really impressed with her acting, but I did notice she's very good impressionist of people. Like on Jimmy Fallon, she's like doing impersonations of Celine Dion and Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston, and I definitely heard Kirsten Chenoweth in her impression of her in this film. Like some of her riffs and the way she sang, and yeah, I was like, okay, I can definitely hear that impression of her, but she made it her own too.
Yeah, I had heard she was really funny too, so I'm like, it was just such a different light seeing her, and so good in it. So I mean, I feel like she gained even more fans from this movie.
Yeah, and count me among them, because I actually thought she did a great job. You really went with her on that journey and really saw her become more of a character with some depth, which, also hats off to the director. He really put together an incredible film. That I would have to say, if there's anyone I want to give credit to here, it's the director. He must have been incredible to work with, because he really pulled together a spectacular film. So, Prejudice and social exclusion is the next one. I think we kind of went over that. Elphaba is marginalized due to her appearance and unconventional beliefs. And the beliefs, like she believes animals should be equal. What does that sound like, you guys? And what do? We discriminate against the animals. And that is something that comes up later in the Oz books, too. So the person who wrote Wicked really pulled a lot from the Oz books. I mean, it really is based on the Oz books, but what you learn is that they were once a great power in society, these animals, and that they, the wizard starts to discriminate against them and to push them out in society and make them a common enemy. And the animals get more and more excluded, and then they lose their voice. They're no longer the intellectuals who ran like government and schools. They suddenly become these just, things out in the field. And that is completely something parallel. This was written, remember, back in 1900, but we could say that theme is very much active in today's world.
Well, if you think about it, that's kind of the racism, because, they kept saying they belong in cages. What I found that fascinating to say in cages, and I'm like, well, it almost sounds like slavery in a way.
Yes.
So I just thought that stuck out to me when they said that. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense already.
Or now we're talking about putting people who are immigrants into detention centers or cages. Right. I mean, it's really interesting that we're going through this same parallel real world experience. We go through the cycle.
Didn't he say that he was trying to unite everybody? And by uniting everybody, he had to have a common enemy for them, and that was the animal.
Yes, I'm going all the way to that quote. Yes, he says, the best way to bring people together is to give them a really good enemy. And I think he and...
that was intentional, it felt like.
You think that was intentional?
It just sounded very intentional, like that was, yeah.
Well, in fact, Michelle Yeoh joins him in that. The Michelle Yeoh who plays Madame Morrible. By the way, you love this name, Madame Morrible, like Madame Horrible. Right. Like it's just one letter off, which she turns out to be. So
she did a great job too.
Oh my God! Now, Brian, did you ever watch Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Oh, I did, but I fell asleep through part of it.
She's the main character. She's incredible in that.
So many things. She's so good.
She's incredible in that. Yeah, and she was great here too. Absolutely. The next theme we see is friendship and emotional bonding. Now we're on number 5. And friendship and emotional bonding. We see in this movie loyalty, jealousy, and reconciliation through Glinda and Elphaba's relationship. You see them coming, first they hate each other. They're forced to live together. And they're kind of pushed to live together because they both want something. Glinda wants to be accepted into Madame Morrible's spells class, and Elphaba, am I saying this right? Elphaba,
yes,
she has to stay. Basically, she's told by her father to stay to take care of her sister Nessa Rose. And so she just does what she's told, even though she didn't especially voice wanting to be there. So Madame Morrible makes Glinda at the time, be able to put her into her room so she could, so they could be together. And that's when you see this horrible side of Glinda, that she just carves out the tiniest little hole for Elphaba to live in this giant, beautiful room. And it kind of goes from there, and they have a lot of trouble together. And what was the turning point, do you think, guys? When did they start to see each other? I have my own theory. I think it's pretty obvious, but...
For me, I thought when Glinda gave her the hat in Elphaba asked Madame Morrible that she wanted Galinda to be part of her private trainings, or else Elphaba was going to leave. And Galinda was so moved and didn't understand why Elphaba was wanting her to be included in that, but that's all she wanted. That's all she wanted to do. So it like touched her. I feel like that was that point where it like switched everything around, and it was right before the dance. So her getting that news right before her Elphaba got there and was like super awkward in front of everybody, it was like the perfect time. Like they did it so well for that to be the switch for Galinda to jump in and like hold her hand out pretty much.
Very good. It's really interesting because that's exactly what I think too. But the hat was an interesting one, wasn't it? Because the two friends of Galinda's, played by Bowen Yang, who's from Saturday Night Live, is one of the friends, and the other one was Shin Shin. That was the girl, and they were making fun of the hats. And Galinda says, "Oh, that my grandma made that. It's so horrible, blah." And they're making fun of it, and then she gives it to Elphaba almost really as a joke to make fun of her. But I think there you saw instantly Elphaba sort of taken aback and like, "Oh, you're giving something to me." You see that moment in her when someone's finally done something nice for her. It was like a first moment. And yes, even though it didn't come with good intentions on Galinda's part, it came with bad intentions, the hat really moved Elphaba because she saw it in a very different way. Then went to Madame Morrible, like you said, and said she has to be in the class. And then Madame Morrible begrudgingly goes to the Oz Dust Ballroom. Is that what it was called? Oz Dust Ballroom, and gives her that training wand, gives Galinda the training wand. And I think that you see her get touched in that moment, because why would this person who I hate do something nice for me? And it just starts to go in a very different direction, and then that dance scene happens. So that was such a pivot point in this movie. But it really illustrates that psychological principle that when you do something nice for somebody, they can go into cognitive dissonance. I mean, you do something nice for someone that doesn't like you, they can go into cognitive dissonance and begin to think, wait a minute, then they, I have to return this favor. They do something nice for you, and then they'll fully start to think, well, I'll only do something nice if I like the person. And you can see an attitude change happen. This is advice I often give to clients. Like it's I call it the Ben Franklin principle, that, Ben Franklin said, if you have a terrible neighbor, borrow a shovel. I think this is the quote, but it's basically borrow a shovel, use it, return it to the neighbor the next day, say, thank you, I really appreciated that. And the neighbor then will start to think, oh, okay, I gave you that shovel and you returned it. I guess I don't hate you that much. And it can actually start to change opinions. We saw the complexities of relationships, and we saw the personal growth that happened through the connection. What was interesting to me with Elphaba, I don't know how you guys felt. Did you ever see the movie Pollyanna, the Disney movie?
Mm-mm.
No.
Oh, Pollyanna, it's like an old term we use to say somebody who's so goody-goody. They're always happy all the time and everything. But that movie I saw as a kid too, and it really struck me that this movie, Pollyanna, who was so perky and happy and loved everybody no matter how horrible they were, she changed people because she genuinely saw people's good sides. She genuinely tried hard, and you saw her change the people around her. And it's interesting that Elphaba had that same effect on people that she knew. They reacted to her negatively at first, but she changed significantly the people around her. So I was really impressed with that, the personal growth, the connection that happened as a power of her. Okay, guys, number 6, power and control. What did you see? We saw power and control, especially, you'd think I'd be talking about it with Elphaba, but really I saw this with the wizard. The wizard's manipulation symbolizes psychological effects of authoritarianism and gaslighting. He was fooling people, and he was trying to make them think, like, one, that the animals are bad people, and he controlled things very, very tightly.
Well, the big thing was that the wizard wasn't even a wizard. He didn't have any magic.
Nope.
He just lied the whole time and got everybody to believe he was this big, powerful wizard.
You did get that, but did you start to figure out that maybe the wizard's more to Elphaba than just the wizard?
In what way? Because it was, for me, the wizard was just like her being validated almost.
But if you go back to the beginning and think of the stranger who comes, who we never see their face, and gives the green bottle to Elphaba.
No, was that the wizard?
To Elphaba's mom.
Wait, was that the wizard?
I think we're going to find out that he plays more.
I didn't realize that. The guy that her Elphaba's mom had an affair with, that was the wizard.
So what we see here are, he's a bad dude. He's authoritarian. He's gaslighting. He's the head of this nation, and he needs to keep a thumb on the scale, or people are going to find out he's a fraud. Does this sound familiar? So he rules with an iron fist, and he's not a nice guy, but he tries to make people think he is. Which is really interesting. And then we see that she is very much a product in some ways. She has a lot of power, though. She has power that, who knows where that power came from. Was it the green bottle? Which at the time I was wondering, is that opium? Because there's a little bit of theme in the movie about that. But I can't answer that.
What's funny is I just looked it up, and it does answer that question.
What's the question? What's the answer, Tony?
It says, yes, the wizard is the father.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Pretty interesting, huh? Yeah.
I wouldn't even have thought that.
Same. That's a big plot twist, even for me right now.
I know, and that's crazy.
I need to go watch it again.
So now it makes sense, though, how they knew pretty much about who she was. Like, they were interested.
I don't know. Yeah, do they know, or do they not know?
They seemed very, like, attached to her. Yes, because of her powers.
Immediately.
Immediately, yes.
Didn't you think, too, when the wizard meets them, he immediately runs out. He's like, oh, I don't need to, like, put on a show for you.
Yeah.
He immediately runs out. And then he goes up to her, and he just only focuses on her.
Yeah.
And does something a dad does with his daughter. He pulled a coin out from behind her ear. He did like a stupid dad trick. And that was an interesting moment for me to watch. I thought that really portrayed this weird intimacy and tenderness between the two of them in just that moment. And Ariana Grande, or I'm sorry, Glinda, is standing there looking, going, what about me, the whole time, which was kind of funny too.
The entire movie, she was very much, what about me?
Yeah, but you see Elphaba struggling when she's with the wizard, that she wants her own autonomy and empowerment. Like, she's going to be with the wizard because she wants to learn from the wizard. She's thinking she's going to spend time. She's going to learn special powers, learn how to harness her magic, her power with the wizard, and instead sees him for what he really is, and then has to pull away and become her own person. This is very much a parent-child analogy, or it's a parent-child dynamic working itself out.
But it also shows you how strong she is, where versus Galinda, who was, I guess, considered friends of hers at the end when they define gravity part, and then goes back to the wizard.
And were you disappointed in that, Tony? Because even though I already knew that would happen, I was still disappointed.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Me too.
I have I don't know, because I don't know what the second part is going to be like, but there's a little part of me, I don't want to ruin it if this is how it is going to turn out, that they're in on it, together, Elphaba and Glinda, on this situation, that when they said that the Wicked Witch of the West is dead, that she's not really dead.
And she knew that, yeah.
Yeah, Galinda and her, it's the chance for Elphaba to just live her life away from every chaos and all the bad press she gets from the city.
Right.
And it's Galinda's way of getting exactly what she wanted in life as well. So Galinda stayed and went back with the wizard and Madame Marvel and becomes her little protege and everything to make it she's going to be the hero of the story. But at the end of the day, I feel like Galinda will always be friends with Elphaba, and even though it portrays that she murdered her pretty much, that she let her sneak away in a way that it makes Glinda the hero, and people just get to forget about Elphaba, and Elphaba can live her life in that sense. That's what I thought.
Well,
or whatever, but
you are going to get that that question answered, Brian. It will. That is, obviously, in the second part of the movie, she is going to appear. So,
because we got to get that after that part.
You got to see. You got to see. I just noticed the time, Tony. So I'm going to go through these a little more quickly. So, the next one I have is number 7, cognitive dissonance. Glinda and Fiyero grapple with conflicting beliefs and actions. So she becomes Glinda, remember, at one point, because she's trying to impress Fiyero, who's concerned about the animals. And there was one of the animals who is Professor, I'm forgetting his name. He was the doctor who was played by Peter Dinklage, who was in Game of Thrones, and and many, many other things. And Fiyero is expressing concern about the animals and the discrimination that's happening with the animals. And this particular animal, who was a goat, played by Peter Dinklage, couldn't say Galinda. He kept saying Glinda because of the kind of stutter in his mouth. He doesn't have front teeth. So she decides to change her name to Glinda in honor of Fiyero, but I love how she does it. She announces it to everybody to make her look very impressive that she's doing this. But then they kind of have to go through their grappling. They're attracted to each other, but maybe not so much, because their values are actually kind of different, at least at first. And we see loyalty and personal values playing out, and people have to figure out, what's more important, loyalty to a person or being true to your values. We especially see that at the end in the scene you were just illustrating, Brian, right at the end. Also, number 8, resilience and transformation, one of my favorite themes. Resilience is Elphaba demonstrates resilience despite all the adversity she suffers. She goes for it. She inspires other people with her inner strength and her inner transformation. Didn't you think? And then number 9 is friendship and loneliness. The complex relationship between Elphaba and Glinda highlights themes of connection, misunderstandings, and reconciliation. This movie was so human, and I actually was really thinking, I was worried about this movie because the stage play is really spectacular. Everything happens at lightning speed. The movie is really slowed down, but they make use of slowing everything down and really give us those personal connections and the humanity between these two characters that's so evident and so powerful. But what was interesting to me, I don't know if you guys saw this, both people, both Elphaba and Glinda were lonely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Elphaba was because of her beliefs, that she believed in equality and she was believed in helping people, and her appearance, that she's green. But Glinda had to deal with, she was lonely because of her popularity. Like she was just the queen bee and she didn't really have any equals around her. Again, Elphaba was probably the only person who really challenged her. A little bit Fiero too.
I just hope people, I mean, at least like younger kids from watching this movie can take that away from the movie where Glinda becomes her friend. And even though they're completely different and they hate each other at first, that she becomes her friend. Because, you know, that happens a lot in school with like somebody that's like the outsider and like they get bullied and stuff. And that one person that's popular can really change that person's life around just by being nice to them, you know, or like just helping them out with whatever they're going through. So I just hope like that.
I do too, Brian. I do too. I think far too many kids are going to want to be like Glinda, or want to be popular like her and pretty.
Yeah.
But I think the real story here is Elphaba and her incredible power to transform the people around her with no magic at all, with just being a strong human being who sticks up for what she believes in and goes forward despite all of society turning against her. Number 10, we have power and isolation, gaining power and authority. Especially as the Wicked Witch isolates Elphaba further. So when she breaks through the glass at the end and does the big number of the show, that is the big number of the show, and she's, you know, look toward the western sky and she's singing about, you know, all I wanted to get a chance to fly, and she's out there tooling around with her broomstick. It shows that, you know, that separates her further, but it's also being true to herself and being able to fight for what she wants. Whereas the wizard, we talked about, has no real power and maintains isolation and propaganda to fool people he has power. So he, you know, that sounds like, I don't know, leaders that we may have coming our way. So it's, you know, that propaganda, continually telling people he's powerful and scary when really he has none at all. And I love the line when Michelle Yeoh, the Madame Morrible, says to Glinda, or it says to Elphaba that, you know, she needs to be afraid of the wizard, something like that. And she said, no, he needs to be afraid of me. Which I think she recognized at that point that he had no real power. He couldn't really read from the book that had all the magic spells in it. And the biggest thing is, of course, you talked about the best way to bring people together is to give them a good enemy. And that's exactly what he focused on, was an enemy to hate. And they would all band together to fight that enemy. Really was sad. And the last theme was moral ambiguity and psychological conflict, challenges the binary of good versus evil, emphasizing circumstantial morality. Like, circumstantial morality is, you know, sometimes things in certain circumstances aren't necessarily bad or aren't necessarily good, depending on what's going on. So we can't really say one thing is good and one thing is evil. You see that with Elphaba, her conflict between doing good and being branded as evil creates a psychological tension, because she really does good in the movie, I think.
Well, I also think it's like sometimes the environment that makes people evil. Like, after so long, like, of being attacked and put down and being left out and everything and bullied, and it's like, you can't expect somebody to have like this beautiful, nice heart after being like push down all the time.
No, you can't. No, I mean, you understood her upset, and
I mean,
all
I
of
would
it.
have been upset. I would have burned the whole city down.
Well, she did. When she get upset, her powers would enact and things would happen around her, but she never really did it herself. I mean, it would just happen. It wasn't until she read from the Book of Spells that she started to make things happen in a different way. But she, you saw things crashing around her, people getting upset. Like when the one woman was taking Nessa Rose in school and Elphaba was trying to say, no, bring her back. She's supposed to take care of her. And she got very angry and caused everything in the school to levitate, including Nessa Rose, to get her away from that woman, which I thought was fascinating. We also saw Glinda as being known as good and doing some good things, mostly for her own advancement or end. So you could look at the objective things she did, like giving Elphaba the hat, but it really wasn't being nice. She also tried to get Nessa Rose, Elphaba's sister, together with Bach. Remember Bach? The woodsman, I believe he was from Munchkin Land. And he was in love with Glinda, and he decided, and she manipulated him to go out with Nessa Rose to please her, so she could get Nessa Rose paired up, which again, also Elphaba thought that was unusually nice, but it was really just so Glinda could get with Fiyero. She was just doing it to get her own stuff done.
There's so much. We're going to need a part 2 for this because we need to wrap up. We need a part 2 Wicked.
So let's say, are people, Glenda asked this at the very beginning, and I'm going to ask you guys, are people born wicked or do they have wickedness thrust upon them?
Wickedness thrust upon them. It's rare that people usually are born evil.
Ditto.
And who do you yeah, I think I agree with you 100%. And who do you think is good, who's bad, and who's green? Green, I think, is misunderstood. That's the misunderstood. Like we think something's something else, but they're really not. Elphaba, what would you say? She's good, bad, or green? You have to pick one.
I think they're all misunderstood, honestly. Each character.
They're all, perhaps.
We're all misunderstood, and we misunderstand a lot of people, honestly.
Perhaps.
The adults are more evil than the kids. When you're younger, you're more misunderstood, yeah. But adults know better.
So I saw Elphaba as good in this movie.
Yeah.
She's good. Even though she's the Wicked Witch, I saw her as the good one. Glinda, by the way, I didn't see as good or bad. I saw her as green because you see her transformation and you could see her inner turmoil, that she's misunderstood even to herself, and that she can start to look inside and be a little bit more self-reflective. She follows the rules a lot, and mostly to gain her own ends, which sometimes has good effects, sometimes not so much. But she's just kind of going through the motions a lot of the time. And to me, the wizard was straight out bad. The wizard here, he was doing some of the really most evil things. So,
amen.
That was, yeah. So that wraps up our show. Thank you, Tony, and thank you, Brian. That wraps up the show for today. Reminder to like, subscribe, give us 5 stars. Links to the studies. Well, we don't really have a study, but you can go to the YouTube page, youtube.com/Dr. Greg, and check out what we have. Also, if you have any questions or topics you'd like to cover, hit me up at socials at Ask Dr. Greg. This is Dr. Greg, Brian, and Tony bidding you farewell. Until next time, be flexible, be present, and be kind.